Okay, so welcome back. I think this is part 4 at this point of this application I'm kind of live coding on. So I'm trying to figure out what we need to do next. So again, every day is going to be able to track a new symptom. So if I refresh this page, it would probably be cool to have like the actual today's date. Awesome. So let's let's fix this bug. This is the first thing we're going to do in this live coding. We have a bug, and yesterday everything is working, but today is a new date, which means the backend is actually returning null. So if I look at the entries here, let me refresh this page. The backend is actually returning null for the response, I believe, which is causing this to crash because it doesn't see any JSON. So I think I need to go to the backend and actually have it return something else. Now, I don't really know what I should return in this instance, like maybe just a default object. It's probably the best approach. So let's just go ahead and go to the backend here, and we have this API entries endpoint. And let's just go ahead and if someone tries to fetch today's date, so the entry for today, if this is null, what we probably need to do is return like a fallback default. So I'm going to say let entry to return is equal to existing entry, or we are going to default to some basic thing that kind of is already in the UI. So let me just go ahead and put that as a 2. And I'll just go ahead and return that JSON. So now this should hopefully prevent this from crashing if I haven't saved an entry for today's date. So let's just go ahead and refresh this page and make sure it doesn't crash. All right, so it didn't. Everything's working good now, so I can check some stuff, save it, and refresh the page, and I should get back the same values at some point. So at this point, again, like I said before I ran into that bug, I want to have like buttons here where I can go back in time, and probably a button here where I can go forward in time, so I can view the entries for yesterday or today, vice versa. At some point, I want to bring in like a third-party library to kind of show a React calculator module or component, but in this stream, I'm trying to keep everything as simple as possible. So starting off, let's just show the date up here, like today's date, so we can kind of like know or get some context as to like what entry we're looking at. Because as you're switching dates for like previous to current, like it's going to get confusing if we're showing or if we're not showing the date at the top. So inside of here, inside of main, let's just put like an H1 or H2, doesn't really matter. I'm going to say today's, I'll say selected date. And I'm going to go ahead and just do that, see what prints out, but we are going to refactor this because this is sloppy. All right, so that kind of works. Now, I'll be honest with you all, dates and date times and stuff is something that I'm just weak at. Like, I'm so bad at date times when it comes to programming. So there's going to be a lot of stuff that I'm going to do. Like, I'm going to have to Google it or use GitHub Copilot to kind of help me through this. I know there's libraries like Moment.js that can make this stuff kind of easier, but I just want to use like the default date stuff that's built into JavaScript, to be honest. But when this page loads, what I want to do is I want to get the current date here. So I'm going to go ahead and just say, like, we'll make a state variable because we do want to have this thing increment and decrement. So I'm going to say const selected date and set selected date is equal to a state variable, which I'm going to default to this, maybe. Might just need to default it to new date so I can do some math on it and stuff like that. But I'll do that. And then I know for a fact I'm going to want to format this date. So if I just try to output this here, wherever that was, here selected date, I believe this will just print out like object. Or maybe it'll print out a giant. Yeah, you can't even do that because it's a date object. So we need to make a method called like format date, which is going to take that date object and kind of do the same thing that we did on the back end. And again, you can make functions outside of the React component if you want to kind of like increase the performance potentially, but it doesn't really matter. Date to format is what I'm going to pass into this function. And I want to return this looks nice. Okay. So Let's go back. So now we're displaying the date, but this is coming from state instead of being hard-coded. So that's putting us in a better position. Now we need to add some buttons to the left and right of this. So starting off, I'm going to go ahead and in this H1, maybe it'd be good to wrap this in a, I won't wrap it in anything. I'll just put a button here and I will just put an arrow like this. Now, sometimes in React, you got to do like special escaped characters for stuff like that because React thinks that your character, your bracket is an actual like HTML tag. Let's do that and see if this actually prints some buttons somewhere. So it looks beautiful. Absolutely stunning. So let's just go ahead and put it at the end. And we can add styling and put some padding in here, but I mean, who cares? Let's just make this work. Functionality is the most important thing. If something actually works, people can use it and actually get value out of it. The styling of something, yeah, it's nice to have, but it doesn't really make or break your app. If your app does the thing it needs to do for users, then you've kind of accomplished that. But anyway, let me get off my soapbox. Let's go here on this left button. Let's have this so when you click it, it calls a function called like go to previous day, maybe. So you click it, it does that. Make sure I do not invoke that function. That would be bad. And this is going to be a function that we can basically put up here. It needs to be inside of the React component because we are going to be messing with the state here. This is the difference between putting something outside and inside the component. If you need to actually touch state, you probably want it to be an anonymous function created inside the component, or make it a helper and put it outside. It doesn't really matter too much, honestly. But we want to take the current date. So I'll say set selected date, and we want to subtract one day from it. And I don't know how to do this. We've done it in the API already, but I'm just going to say subtract one day from selected date. How about that? Now, hopefully Copilot will tell me how to do this. If not, this does not look right. There's probably a better way to do this. So we get a date, subtract a day. Okay, that's a better approach. Sometimes you gotta, play around with Copilot until it can actually recognize what you're trying to do. This is a much better solution. Honestly, I don't think we need to do a new date on this because this is already a date object. So I'm just gonna say new selected date is equal to that. I think this will work fine. Maybe it'll be a bug. Who knows? Let's find out. So I guess if you select -1, that's just subtracting a day. So let's click on it and see what happens. New date is not defined. Yeah, so let's do that. Let's set the current selected date to the selected date get date -1, and let's see if that does something. New date is still not defined, obviously. Okay, let me just go back and I'm gonna say new date is equal to selected date, and let's just go back and fix this stuff. Don't know. I'm not gonna spend too much time trying to figure it out. But now I can click and kind of go back in time, and the date thing will work perfectly. Notice how it went from like April to March. Let's do the same thing for the increment. So const go to next day. Obviously the same code. And then I could just +1. And then I could basically figure out a way to like add double arrow buttons if I wanted to skip forward a whole month or something. Honestly, let's just keep this simple. I could also abstract this into, like, you see how this code is basically the same code? I could abstract this into a helper function called like change date by days, and that takes in a numeric number, and that could be like put in here, but honestly, like, it doesn't matter. So let's just go over here and let's just say on click, and we are going to call this method. Like I mentioned in some of my videos, sometimes over abstracting your code just for the sake of it, like, it just overcomplicates stuff. Like, this is fine. Duplicate code's fine sometimes. If you really want to abstract this away to make it seem like it's more clean, by all means do it. But sometimes you just end up shooting yourself in the foot by over abstracting and doing some stuff. but I'll probably regret saying that because I'm probably gonna have to abstract some of this stuff. So what we need to do is when we click on this button, we actually need to fetch the current date that we want. So we might have to add a new entry here or kind of change the way this works. So I'm going to make a function up here called like get entry by date. And that's going to take in a date string. I'll say year, month, day string. Super ugly, but hey, it's descriptive as to what we're doing. And when we call this function, we're going to hit the back in here. So let's copy some of this code. And what we want this to do is basically use that year, month, day string, and we're going to pass that to the backend inside the URL itself. Again, we don't have this API endpoint created yet, so we'll have to go back and fix it. But what we want to do is basically return what comes back when you do this. One thing I noticed is that we don't need this if statement anymore, and we also don't need the set form stuff because we are abstracting away the fetch request into a function that we can kind of reuse. So first of all, when the app loads, I can actually call this and actually probably just put selected date, right? Because that should be today. Although I probably need to say, you know, I should just trust CodePilot. It was telling me how to do it. So we'll get the actual entry for today, and then we can just set it on the state itself. Okay, so look how elegant that code is. I don't know if it works. It might work. Let's see if I save that, refresh the page. Took me back to 421. The backend is crashing because obviously we don't have an endpoint that handles that. So let's go ahead and add that. Oh wait, I need to fix this. This entry should be, let me rename that to today's form, or I'll rename that to entry. Okay, I'm just jumping around. I'll just keep that form. That look good, y'all? And also, I don't need the brackets here, obviously. That might clean it up just a little bit. All right, so in Next.js, there is a way to basically allow the user to pass in dynamic things in the URL. So let's see if my memory is good with Next.js. I think I need to make a new folder called entries, and inside of entries, I need to rename this one and just put like date string or something. And if I put this date string right here, I think now this will be invoked whenever you try to get or put to this endpoint. And there should be a way to actually get the entry. So instead of like hard coding this to today's date, there should be a way to get this from the request in Next. I don't remember how to do that. Get date string from Next route param. I guess you just do that. I mean, it's very similar to Express.js, so hopefully this is correct. And I could just use that. So instead of hard coding and fetching today's date every single time, we were actually fetching whatever date that we put in. And now this handle put method probably needs to change as well because we did hard code that. And we just need to make sure that we change wherever we said today's date with date string. So hopefully this works. Let's see. All right, let's go back, see what happens. Refresh the page and make sure that the initial get works. And it seems like it's trying to fetch something, cannot resolve. Okay, so I did put this in a different folder, so I do believe I need to go down. I need to add like a .. so it knows how to find these things properly. About to perform my full refresh. Okay. Interesting. Haven't seen that one before, but hey. Let's refresh the page, make sure it fetches the correct information from the backend. The backend fails with a 500 error. So going to our backend, we can see that rec.params is actually not defined. So at this point, what we need to do is we need to go to the next docs. Because I must be doing something wrong here. Rec.query. For example, the API route pages API post PID has the code rec.query. So yeah, I guess this comes from query. It's a little bit different than express, so I should probably change this to query. And I could probably just do the shorthand to make it a little bit cleaner. And we do that down here as well, so we should probably just fix that code. Let me save it again. I saw an error. I wasn't sure if that was an actual real error. All right, let's try it again. Refresh the page, see what happens. All right, we did the request. We got that date back from the back end. That's working beautifully. If you go back in time, again, what we're trying to do, actually, before I move on, I think if I try to save, this is broken now because we're just trying to save the entries in entries. But now we need to change this URL to be the actual selected date. So let's go back to the front end and find where we're doing the put request. Doing a Command F is like by far the most important thing when it comes to learning how to be efficient at coding. Like if you know what you're kind of looking for, like Command F is the bomb. Like I could do a full project search and do a put, but then you get a bunch of stuff back that you don't care. And then you have to like go and dive down and change like what files you're looking at. But as you just saw, like I know I'm in the file that I want and I know there's a piece of code that says put related to what I want. Just do Command F and look for stuff. But anyway, let me just go ahead and put selected date here. I might need to format that as well. Let me go up here. Yeah, I'm actually going to make this an abstract function as well. I'm going to say put entry by date. This will be the date. I'll do entry. Let me think for a second. Yeah, I guess this will work for right now. So instead of having this, you know, fetch code hard-coded in my React component, it's better to kind of abstract those away into other files. I could, if I wanted to, you know, make different files for these API service requests, but right now, let me just pass in form here. And once this is done, where am I calling it? So instead, we can just call it here, I believe. And we could pass it all of this stuff. And honestly, when it's done, we don't care about it. So let's just not do anything. Obviously, you'd probably want to do some type of alerts if something goes wrong or whatever. But let's go back and verify this works. So clear out the console, click on some stuff, click save, and did it work? Did it work? That's the question. So if I refresh the page, we should get average, and then 2 checkboxes are not checked. So we are persisting the data back like it was working fine before. And the app seems like it's in a pretty good state. So, I mean, obviously, when you get stuff working pretty good, I would just, you know, commit that stuff. So I'm going to say adding the ability to navigate forward and backward. Adding the ability to go back and forward in time, semicolon, I'm going to say refactoring API to only accept date strings. Okay, we got commit. Let's just go ahead and push it real quick. And you can also use the GitHub like thing over here if you want, if you're a noob. I'm just kidding. You can, like, I use this a lot as well if I can find it. I like to go through here. If it's like a lot of changes, it really helps me visualize what's changed. But if I'm just dealing with 2 files, I'll just use the command line. I don't know why I like the command line. It just makes me feel like I'm a hacker, but whatever. Let's just go back. So now as we select different dates, you can imagine we need to fetch the current value of those dates, right? So let's go here, go to previous day and go to next day. What we need to do is we need to get the entry by date, very similar to what we're doing. And I could also abstract this out to a function if I wanted to, right? We could make this a function called fetch current. Okay, I'm gonna rename this to fetch selected date from API. And what that's going to do is basically fetch the selected date and put it on the state. So now I could just use that helper function here I need to move it up because I do plan to use it here and here. Now, here's the issue. The thing I hate about React, I despise this, is that I've updated the selected date with a new date. But unfortunately, this is going to use an older cached version of this. So I'm going to make this more abstract as well. And I'm going to go ahead and just pass in like date to fetch here. And this will make it so we can actually like call it. I don't know if I'm explaining this well, but like if you know React, you'll notice that this is like, if I try to do this the old way, it's going to fetch like an older version. I do believe I need to, oh, I don't need to format it, do I? Yeah, so basically instead of having this rely on the actual state variable, I'm having this pass in as an argument. If you wanted to do it relying on the state variable, you probably have to use another useEffect hook and then have it like depend on that state changing. It's dirty. I don't like it, but we could also pull this even further up, I believe, outside of the component if you wanted to. But then I think we'd have to pass in the set form setter. So that's really up to you. I don't know, you decide what's the better approach. But let's see if this works. I doubt it will, but let's see. Obviously, it doesn't work. Cannot read properties of undefined reading ISO string. So what happened here? Oh, okay. Well, I need to be passing the actual selected date here, I believe. So let's try that. And as we go back in time, it's fetching the entries from older things. So let's just go ahead and like change some of the stuff to make it like persist. Go ahead and make this checked. And I'll go into the future. So as I go back, notice that it's actually fetching the data that I had selected. Right, I have entries at the 17th and then stuff like that. So now we actually have a pretty cool app. Like I can go and I can select different dates. I can persist them, and all these are being saved to MongoDB as we kind of save and retrieve them. I can refresh the page, go back to today's date, and just view like, how were my symptoms today? Was I average? Was I good, bad? And like what things that I do that made it that day. So I'm definitely going to do another commit for that because I think this code is looking pretty fresh and this feature is pretty cool. So I'm going to go ahead and say fetching stored entries when making a git commit sometimes can be so hard to figure out the perfect thing because you want to name it or you want the sentence to be really descriptive about what you're doing, but you don't want it to be too long that it's like verbose. But fetching stored entries when navigating the dates. I don't know. How about that? Probably could have spent more time to think of a better description. But now I have a cool git log. I can see like all the different things I've done. And I can go back in time if I wanted to and just see. Another cool thing is only commit when stuff is working. Like try to follow that rule of thumb. Like when your code seems like everything is good, that's when you can do a commit. Sometimes you can't do this every time. But what it allows you to do is you can go back and kind of check out a commit like back in history as like whenever you want. And there's a good confidence, or you have good confidence that like it's going to be working. If you just start committing and pushing like every single time you just make any changes, there's a chance that stuff might be breaking if you don't follow that little convention. But yeah, I hope you guys learned something from that. I'm actually really liking this app so far. I could refactor some more code and pull this out into different folders or something. I need to Google like what the best approach is for that type of project structure, but maybe I'll do that for next video, but I think this is looking pretty fresh. So if you guys like watching this, give me a thumbs up. Also be sure to subscribe if you're new to this channel. And like always, leave a comment below if you have a different idea about how I'm writing this Next.js code and you have a different suggestion. Have a good day and happy coding.